The story opens on a distant planet, orbiting the dying star of Zeta Draconis, home to the vast and oppressive Kalith Empire. For centuries, they had expanded their dominion across the galaxy through sheer might and advanced technology. There, warships were legendary, massive vessels bristling with weapons capable of reducing entire planets to ash. To them, conquest was not just an act, it was a way of life. But humanity? Humanity barely registered as more than a footnote in the Empire's archives. When humans first ventured into space, clumsily broadcasting signals and attempting contact with alien civilizations, the Kalith dismissed them outright. They saw Earth as little more than a backwater rock, teeming with short-lived creatures who could barely manage to keep themselves alive. After one brief meeting where human diplomats stumbled over formalities and failed to impress the regal Kalith ambassadors, the Empire decided that humanity wasn't worth further attention. And so, Earth faded from memory, or so everyone thought. On Earth itself, things were different. Humans had spent decades recovering from their own mistakes, rebuilding after centuries of environmental neglect and internal conflict. With unity came progress, and soon humanity began taking tentative steps toward the stars. They built small colonies on nearby moons and sent probes deep into uncharted space. But none of this mattered to the Kalith. What use was a species whose greatest achievement, their prototype warship Aegis Dawn, sat abandoned in Earth's orbit for years? It was outdated by the time it was completed, deemed too costly to maintain, and left to gather cosmic dust. That is, until now, far away from Earth, tensions simmered within the Kalith Empire. A rival faction known as the Veil Syndicate had grown bold, challenging the Empire's dominance. War erupted between the two powers, turning entire star systems into battlefields. Fleets clashed in dazzling displays of destruction, leaving trails of debris floating like ghostly remnants in the void. The Kalith High Command believed victory was inevitable, but then something unexpected happened. In a remote sector near the edge of explored space, a massive fleet of Kalith warships encountered resistance unlike anything they'd ever seen. An unknown vessel emerged from the shadows of an asteroid belt, a hulking, battered ship clearly designed for combat, but showing signs of disrepair. Its surface was scarred with micrometeorite impacts, its paint peeled away in patches, and yet there was no mistaking the defiance in its presence. As the Kalith admiral ordered his crew to scan the mysterious craft, he scoffed at what appeared to be nothing more than a relic from some forgotten age. Then, without warning, the strange ship struck. Energy beams lanced out from its cannons, cutting through the shields of 3 Kalith cruisers in seconds. Missiles streaked across the battlefield, targeting weaknesses in enemy formations with surgical precision. The once mighty Kalith Armada faltered under the relentless assault, their coordination crumbling as panic spread among their ranks. By the time the skirmish ended, half the fleet lay in ruins, drifting silently in the cold vacuum of space. Back aboard the victorious ship, a voice crackled over the intercom. "Well," said Captain Elena Vasquez, leaning back in her chair with a mix of exhaustion and triumph, "guess we showed 'em what happens when you ignore us." Elena was a veteran of Earth's early colonization efforts, chosen to lead the skeleton crew assigned to reactivate Aegis Dawn. Officially, the mission had been labeled a training exercise, a chance to test old tech against simulated threats. Unofficially, Earth's leaders knew the galaxy was dangerous, and even if humanity wanted peace, they needed options. So when reports came in about Kalith ships prowling dangerously close to human territory, Elena and her team took matters into their own hands. Now, staring at the wreckage of the Kalith fleet, Elena felt both awe and dread. She hadn't expected the ship to perform so well, or for the fight to escalate so quickly. But one thing was certain: the Kalith would not forget this encounter, and neither would anyone else. As the battered but victorious Aegis Dawn limped back toward Earth, news of the battle traveled faster than light. Across the galaxy, whispers began to circulate. Who were these newcomers? What kind of weapon could destroy an entire Kalith armada? Most importantly, why had the Empire ignored them for so long? Little did anyone know, humanity's journey was Only beginning. This sets up the mystery and intrigue while introducing humanity as underestimated and seemingly irrelevant before revealing their hidden potential through Aegis Dawn. The hook lies in the unexpected capability of the prototype warship and the looming question of how the Caliph will respond. The news of the battle spread like wildfire across the galaxy, carried by subspace relays and whispered among traders, mercenaries, and spies. The Caliph Empire, humiliated and enraged, scrambled to understand what had happened. Their analysts pored over data from the skirmish, trying to piece together how a single ship, one they didn't even recognize, had obliterated half their fleet. For days, theories circulated within the Empire's high command. Was it a secret weapon developed by the Veil Syndicate? A rogue faction testing experimental technology? Or something far more unsettling? Meanwhile, back on Earth, Captain Elena Vasquez and her crew returned to a hero's welcome, but not without controversy. News of the engagement had reached home faster than expected, thanks to intercepted transmissions picked up by Earth's listening posts. While many celebrated the victory as proof of humanity's potential, others were deeply uneasy. Some leaders worried that provoking the Caliph could bring catastrophic consequences. Others questioned whether humanity was ready to step onto the galactic stage at all. Elena stood before the United Earth Council in a tense meeting held in an austere chamber beneath the sprawling capital city. Holographic displays flickered around the room, showing footage of the battle captured by Aegis Dawn's sensors. The council members stared at her with expressions ranging from awe to suspicion. "You acted without authorization," said Councillor Marissa Chen, her voice sharp. "You engaged a superior force in direct combat. What if they retaliate?" Elena met her gaze calmly. "They already know we exist now," she replied. "If we'd run, they would have hunted us down anyway. At least this way we showed them we can fight." Councillor Chen frowned but didn't argue further. Instead, another member spoke up, a scientist named Dr. Amir Patel, who had overseen much of Earth's early space exploration efforts. "What fascinates me is how well the ship performed," he said, gesturing toward the hologram of Aegis Dawn. "It's outdated tech, designed decades ago when humanity barely understood interstellar travel. Yet it outmaneuvered one of the most advanced fleets in the galaxy." Elena nodded. "That's because it wasn't just about the ship, it was about the people flying it. We adapted. We used every trick we knew, and some we made up on the spot." Her words hung in the air, sparking murmurs among the council members. Humanity's greatest strength, it seemed, wasn't its technology, but its ingenuity. Still, the question remained, what next? Unbeknownst to Earth, the Caliph were already moving. Admiral Krylos, commander of the defeated fleet, faced a tribunal aboard his flagship. His failure was unprecedented, and the Emperor demanded answers. Krylos, however, wasn't cowed. He presented his findings with quiet confidence. "The enemy ship," he began, his deep voice resonating through the chamber. "It doesn't match any known design in our databases. Its tactics were unconventional, unpredictable. They exploited weaknesses in our formations we didn't think possible, and their weapons, they cut through our shields like they weren't." "There," he paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "This isn't just a random attack. These beings, they're clever, dangerous. If we underestimate them again, we'll lose far more than a few ships." The Emperor leaned forward, his golden armor glinting under the artificial light. "Then find them," he commanded. "Discover who they are, where they come from, and what they want. And once you do—" He let the sentence trail off, but the implication was clear. Krylos bowed low. "As you wish, my lord. As you wish." Back on Earth, preparations were underway. Despite the Council's divided opinions, everyone agreed that humanity couldn't afford to be caught off guard again. Engineers swarmed over Aegis Dawn, repairing the damage sustained during the battle and upgrading its systems wherever possible. Meanwhile, Eleanor worked tirelessly with military strategists to develop contingency plans. She knew the Caliph wouldn't stay quiet for long. One evening, as she walked along the observation deck overlooking the orbital dock, she spotted a familiar figure waiting for her. It was Lieutenant Marcus Kane, her second-in-command and closest friend. Like her, he bore the weary look of someone carrying too much responsibility too soon. "They're coming," Marcus said without preamble. We both know it. Elena sighed, resting her hands on the railing as she gazed out at the stars. Yeah, and when they do, we'll need to be ready. Marcus hesitated, then added, There's something else. Intelligence reports suggest the Caliph are sending scouts into nearby systems. They're looking for us. Elena turned to face him, her expression grim. Let them look. We've got a head start, but we can't rely on luck forever. As they stood there, watching the distant glow of Earth below, a thought occurred to Elena. The Caliph viewed humanity as insignificant, weak, unworthy of notice. That arrogance had blinded them once, and it might blind them again. Humanity didn't need superior numbers or cutting-edge technology to win. They needed something far simpler. Heart. Days later, the first sign of the Caliph's return came in the form of a small probe drifting near the edge of human-controlled space. When scientists examined it, they discovered its purpose: to gather intelligence. The probe was equipped with sophisticated scanning equipment capable of detecting life signs, energy signatures, and even cultural patterns. But what surprised everyone was the message embedded in its programming. Translated from the Caliph language, it read, To the unknown adversaries, you have proven yourselves formidable. Reveal yourselves, and perhaps we may negotiate terms. The council debated fiercely over how to respond. Should they ignore the key message, send a counteroffer, or prepare for war? In the end, Elena convinced them to take a bold step. We don't negotiate from a position of fear, she told the council. We show them exactly who we are and what we're capable of. With that decision made, humanity prepared to send its reply, not with words but with action. Little did anyone realize, the Caliph weren't the only ones watching. Across the galaxy, other civilizations took note of the sudden emergence of this new player. Whispers grew louder, curiosity turned to intrigue, and alliances began to shift. Humanity's arrival on the galactic stage had set events in motion that no one could have predicted. And somewhere in the vastness of space, Admiral Krylos smiled faintly. Perhaps, he thought, these humans weren't so primitive after all. The days following the Caliph's message passed in a blur of activity. Earth's leaders, scientists, and strategists worked around the clock to prepare for what came next. Humanity had taken its first steps onto the galactic stage, but none of them were naive enough to believe this was anything less than a test, a challenge that would define their place among the stars. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of Aegis Dawn, her eyes scanning the vast expanse of space outside the viewport. The ship hummed softly beneath her feet, its systems fully operational after weeks of repairs and upgrades. She felt a strange mix of pride and unease. Pride because humanity had proven itself capable against overwhelming odds. Unease because she knew the real fight was just beginning. "We've got movement," announced Lieutenant Marcus Kane from his station at Tactical Control. His voice cut through the quiet tension like a blade. Multiple contacts emerging near Proxima Centauri. Elena straightened, her pulse quickening. "How many?" "Scouts," Marcus replied, studying the data streaming across his screen. "Small ships, fast movers. They're probing our defenses." It wasn't an invasion, not yet, but it was clear the Caliph weren't willing to let the matter rest. Admiral Krylos had been ordered to find answers, and he was doing so methodically. These scouts weren't here to attack. They were gathering intelligence, mapping human territory, and testing their resolve. Elena clenched her fists briefly before forcing herself to relax. She turned to her crew, who were already springing into action. "All right, people," she said firmly. "Let's give them something to think about." The plan was simple but daring. Instead of confronting the scouts directly, Elena decided to use deception. Humanity's greatest advantage wasn't firepower, it was creativity. Using drones equipped with holographic projectors, they created illusions of larger fleets patrolling the edges of human-controlled space. To any observer, it would appear as though Earth had amassed an impressive defensive force. When the Caliph scouts approached, they encountered these phantom ships. Their sensors detected massive vessels bristling with weapons, moving in coordinated patterns that suggested advanced tactics. Confused by the sudden appearance of such a formidable presence, the scouts retreated hastily, transmitting their findings back to Kalith Command. Admiral Krylos received the report with growing frustration. Every attempt to understand humanity only deepened the mystery. How could a species considered primitive possess such sophisticated technology? And why did their tactics seem so unpredictable? He paced the length of his flagship's command center, his mind racing. There was something about these humans that didn't fit the usual patterns of galactic civilizations. Most species, either, relied on brute strength or technological superiority to survive. But humanity, they were different. They adapted. They improvised. And most unsettling of all, they fought not out of desperation, but with purpose. Krylos stopped mid-stride, struck by a sudden realization. Perhaps the key to understanding humanity lay not in their machines, but in their motivations. What drove them? What made them risk everything, even annihilation, for survival? Back on Earth, the Council convened once again to discuss the situation. While some members praised Elena's strategy, others voiced concerns about escalating tensions. Councillor Marissa Chen, ever cautious, argued against further provocation. "We're playing with fire," she warned. "Every move we make brings us closer to war. Do we really want to gamble the future of our species on one captain's instincts?" Dr. Amir Patel countered her argument with surprising passion. "What choice do we have?" he asked. "If we show weakness now, the Kalith will crush us without hesitation. But if we stand firm, if we prove that humanity is more than they assumed, we might earn their respect." Councillor Chen shook her head, unconvinced. "Respect doesn't win wars." "No," Elena interjected, stepping forward. Her voice carried a quiet authority that silenced the room. "But ingenuity does, courage does, heart does. We may not have the biggest fleet or the strongest weapons, but we have something the Kalith don't: the ability to adapt, to innovate, to care for each other. That's what makes us dangerous." Her words resonated deeply, even among those who doubted her methods. Slowly, reluctantly, the Council agreed to continue supporting Elena's efforts. But they also authorized the construction of additional ships, drawing on designs inspired by Aegis Dawn. Humanity's days of relying on outdated prototypes were over. As preparations continued, Elena faced another challenge, one far more personal. Among the crew of Aegis Dawn was Ensign Ava Reyes, a young engineer whose brilliance had played a crucial role in repairing the ship after the initial battle. However, Ava struggled with self-doubt, haunted by memories of mistakes made during training exercises. When a critical system malfunction threatened to delay their readiness, Ava hesitated to step up, fearing she'd fail again. Elena noticed and pulled her aside after hours. "You're brilliant, Ava," she said gently. "Don't let fear hold you back. We need you." Ava looked down, tears welling in her eyes. "What if I mess up? What if I let everyone down?" "You won't," Elena replied firmly. "Because we're a team. No one succeeds alone, and no one fails alone either. Trust yourself, and trust us." With renewed determination, Ava returned to work. Hours later, she solved the problem, earning praise from the entire crew. It was a small victory, but it reminded everyone of what truly mattered: resilience, trust, and the bonds that united them. Meanwhile, whispers of humanity's defiance spread beyond the Kalith Empire. Other civilizations took notice, intrigued by the emergence of this unexpected player. Some saw potential allies in Earth's people, others viewed them as a threat. Diplomatic envoys began arriving in secret, seeking audiences with Earth's leaders. Humanity found itself at the center of a web of intrigue, their actions rippling outward in ways no one could have anticipated. Admiral Krylos watched these developments closely, his curiosity deepening. He couldn't shake the feeling that humanity represented something unique, a spark of unpredictability in a galaxy governed by rigid hierarchies and cold logic. And somewhere, deep within the heart of the Kalith Empire, plans were being forged. Plans that would change everything. For now, though, humanity stood tall, ready to face whatever came next. The galaxy seemed to hold its breath as humanity and the Kalith Empire teetered on the edge of an inevitable clash. Tensions had reached a boiling point, with both sides preparing for what could only be described as a decisive confrontation. Yet, amidst the looming storm, something unexpected happened, something that would shift the balance of power in ways no one could have foreseen. It began quietly enough. Admiral Krylos, still haunted by his earlier defeat and driven by orders from the Emperor himself, launched a bold operation aimed at uncovering humanity's secrets once and for all. Under cover of darkness, a small but highly advanced stealth ship slipped into human-controlled space, bypassing defenses through a series of clever maneuvers designed to exploit gaps in Earth's sensor networks. Its mission was simple yet dangerous: infiltrate Earth's orbital dockyards and gather intelligence directly from Aegis Dawn. Meanwhile, Captain Elena Vasquez paced the observation deck of her ship, unable to shake the feeling that they were being watched. Her instincts had always been sharp, a trait honed during years of service, and now those instincts screamed at her to act. She called Marcus Kane to her side, her brow furrowed with concern. "Something feels off," she said, staring out. "Stare at the silent void beyond the viewport. We've got patrols running constant sweeps, but I can't shake the idea that we're missing something." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "Could be paranoia after everything we've been through, or..." He hesitated, then added, "or maybe someone's already here." Elena turned to him sharply. "You think the Caliph are inside our borders?" "It's possible," Marcus admitted. "If they sent a scout or a cloaked vessel, it wouldn't show up on standard scans unless it made a mistake." That night, Elena ordered an emergency sweep of the entire orbital perimeter using experimental detection algorithms developed by none other than Ensign Ava Reyes. The young engineer had spent countless hours refining the software, drawing inspiration from the improvisational tactics used during their first battle against the Caliph fleet. Though untested in real-world conditions, the program promised to detect even the faintest energy signatures, a potential game-changer if it worked. As dawn broke over Earth below, the results came in. "There," Ava exclaimed, pointing to a faint blip on her monitor. "It's moving slowly, trying to stay hidden, but it's definitely there." Elena leaned closer, studying the data. "How close is it?" "Too close," Marcus muttered grimly. "Less than 1,000 kilometers away, and heading straight for the dockyards." Time froze for a moment as reality sank in. If the Caliph reached Aegis Dawn, they could sabotage the ship, or worse, steal its technology. Humanity's greatest weapon might become their downfall. The decision was made quickly. Elena assembled a strike team consisting of herself, Marcus, Ava, and a handful of trusted crew members. Armed with portable EMP devices and cutting-edge countermeasures, they boarded a sleek interceptor craft and set out to intercept the intruder before it reached its target. The chase was tense and nerve-wracking. The Caliph vessel moved like a ghost, slipping through debris fields and shadowy zones where sensors struggled to penetrate. But Ava's algorithm proved invaluable, guiding them closer with each passing second. Finally, after what felt like hours, they caught sight of the enemy ship, a sleek black dagger slicing through the void. "Prepare to board," Elena commanded, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "We don't know how many are on board, so stay sharp." The interceptor matched speed with the Caliph craft, deploying magnetic clamps to secure itself. As the boarding party breached the hull, they found themselves facing not a swarm of heavily armed soldiers, but a lone operative, a scientist, judging by the equipment scattered around the cramped interior. The alien raised its hands in surrender, clearly unprepared for combat. "Who are you?" Elena demanded, her weapon trained on the figure. "And why are you here?" Through a translator device, the Caliph spoke haltingly. "I am a researcher, sent to study your ship, not warrior." Eleanor exchanged a glance with Marcus. This wasn't an invasion force, it was reconnaissance, a desperate attempt by the Caliph to understand humanity's secret strength, but it was what they discovered next that truly changed everything. Among the scientists' gear was a data core containing classified information stolen from the Caliph archives. It detailed plans for a devastating superweapon capable of annihilating entire star systems, and revealed that the Empire intended to use it against Earth if diplomacy failed. Elena's blood ran cold. "They weren't just spying on us," she whispered. "They were planning genocide." When the strike team returned to Aegis Dawn with the captured operative and the damning evidence, the mood aboard the ship shifted dramatically. No longer were they defending themselves merely to prove their worth. Now they were fighting for survival, for the very future of their species. Elena presented the findings to the United Earth Council via secure transmission. The reaction was immediate and unanimous. Humanity would not cower in the face of such a threat. They would stand together united and fight back, not just for themselves but for every civilization threatened by the Calith's tyranny. Admiral Krylos received word of the failed infiltration attempt with growing unease. The humans had not only thwarted his plan, but uncovered secrets meant to remain buried. For the first time, he began to question whether the Calith Empire truly understood the enemy they faced. And deep within the heart of Earth's leadership, a new resolve took root. Humanity wasn't just a forgotten prototype anymore. They were a beacon of hope, a symbol of ingenuity, resilience, and defiance. As Elena stood on the bridge of Aegis Dawn, gazing out at the stars, she felt a quiet certainty settle over her. The road ahead would be long and fraught with danger, but one thing was clear. Humanity had found its purpose among the stars. The revelation of the Calith superweapon sent shockwaves through humanity. Fear and anger rippled across Earth, but they were tempered by a steely determination that had been growing ever since Aegis Dawn first proved itself in battle. The United Earth Council convened an emergency session, broadcasting live to every corner of the planet. For the first time in history, humanity stood united, not just as nations or factions, but as one people facing an existential threat. Captain Elena Vasquez watched the broadcast from the bridge of Aegis Dawn. Her expression, grim yet resolute, she knew this moment would define them. Either humanity would rise to meet the challenge head-on, or it would crumble under the weight of its own fear. There was no middle ground. "We have two options," Councillor Marissa Chen said during the meeting, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "We can wait for the Calith to strike us with their weapon and hope we survive, or we can take the fight to them before they're ready." Dr. Amir Patel leaned forward, his eyes blazing with conviction. "If we strike now while they're still mobilizing, we might stand a chance. But if we hesitate even for a day, we lose everything." Elena nodded silently, agreeing wholeheartedly. This wasn't about pride or revenge, it was about survival. And more than that, it was about protecting others who couldn't defend themselves against the Calith's tyranny. The Council voted unanimously to launch a preemptive strike. It was a risky gamble. Humanity's forces were still outnumbered and outgunned, but they had something the Calith didn't: heart. Plans were drawn up overnight, resources pooled, and alliances forged. Engineers worked tirelessly to retrofit old ships and construct new ones based on designs inspired by Aegis Dawn. Every available hand was called upon, from seasoned veterans to fresh recruits eager to prove themselves. Admiral Krylos received news of humanity's preparations with a mixture of frustration and fascination. He had underestimated them once, and he wouldn't make the same mistake again. Reports poured in daily about Earth's growing fleet and their unconventional tactics. Scouts described how human crews trained relentlessly, pushing themselves beyond limits most species would consider impossible. Others noted the way leaders rallied civilians, turning ordinary citizens into vital cogs in the war machine. "They're not just fighting for themselves," Krylos muttered to his second-in-command, Commander Vera. "They're fighting for each other, for their families, their homes, their future." Vera frowned. "That doesn't change the fact that they're still inferior to us in every measurable way. Numbers, technology, experience, they lack all of it. Lack all." Krylos shook his head slowly. "You're wrong. Strength isn't always measured in numbers or weapons. Sometimes it's measured in willpower, in unity. And if there's one thing these humans have shown us, it's that they refuse to give up." Despite his doubts, Krylos issued orders to accelerate construction of the superweapon. If humanity dared to attack, the Empire would respond with overwhelming force. No mercy. No hesitation. Back aboard Aegis Dawn, tensions ran high as final preparations neared completion. Elena gathered her crew for a briefing, pacing back and forth as she spoke. "We're going deep into enemy territory," she began, her voice firm but tinged with emotion. "This won't be easy. Many of us may not come back, but I need you to remember why we're doing this. We're not just soldiers, we're protectors of our world, of our people, and of anyone else who refuses to bow to oppression." Her words resonated deeply, especially with Ensign Ava Reyes. Once plagued by self-doubt, Ava now stood tall, her confidence bolstered by the trust Elena and the crew had placed in her. She stepped forward, holding up a small device, a portable EMP generator she had designed herself. "I've upgraded the EMP tech," Ava said proudly. "It should knock out their shields and weapons long enough for us to get close. If we time it right, we can disable their command ships without firing a shot." Helena smiled, placing a hand on Ava's shoulder. "Good work, Ensign. That could turn the tide." But even as hope swelled among the humans, sacrifices loomed large. Supplies were stretched thin, and many volunteers gave up comforts at home to ensure the fleet was fully stocked. Families said tearful goodbyes to loved ones heading off to war, knowing some might never return. Yet amidst the sorrow there was also pride, a shared belief that what they were doing mattered. The mission launched under cover of darkness, with Aegis Dawn leading a ragtag fleet of retrofitted ships toward the heart of Calith space. At Tlongtsue, the way they encountered resistance, patrols, ambushes, and traps laid specifically to slow them down. Each skirmish tested their resolve, but humanity's ingenuity shone brightest in those moments. Pilots executed daring maneuvers to outmaneuver superior vessels. Engineers patched hull breaches mid-battle, and medics worked miracles to save wounded crewmates. One particularly harrowing engagement saw Lieutenant Marcus Kane taking command of a damaged frigate after its captain was incapacitated. With minimal training and sheer determination, he coordinated a desperate counterattack that turned the tide of the battle. When the dust settled, his crew cheered, calling him a hero. Marcus simply shrugged, saying, "We did what we had to." Word of humanity's progress spread quickly, reaching not only the Calith, but also other civilizations watching from afar. Some offered covert support, supplies smuggled through neutral zones, intelligence shared via encrypted channels. Others sent messages of encouragement, praising Earth's bravery. Slowly but surely, humanity began to inspire hope in corners of the galaxy where none had existed before. As the fleet approached the Calith homeworld, Admiral Krylos prepared for the inevitable clash. His forces were formidable, arrayed in tight formations designed to overwhelm any attacker. But as he stared at the tactical display showing the approaching human fleet, he felt a pang of uncertainty. These weren't mindless drones or expendable cannon fodder. They were individuals willing to risk everything for a cause greater than themselves. And then it hit him. Perhaps the Calith Empire wasn't fighting an external enemy at all. Perhaps they were confronting something far more dangerous, their own arrogance. When the battle finally erupted, it was chaos incarnate. Explosions lit up the void as ships clashed in dazzling displays of firepower. Humanity fought with reckless abandon, using every trick in their arsenal to gain the upper hand. Ava's EMP devices wreaked havoc on Calith defenses, creating openings for bold strikes led by Elena and her crew. Yet despite their successes, the cost was staggering. Ships burned, lives were lost, and the weight of sacrifice pressed heavily on everyone involved. As Aegis Dawn pushed deeper into enemy lines, Elena realized the battle raged on, a chaotic symphony of destruction and defiance. Humanity's fleet was battered but unbroken, their ships weaving through the Calith Armada with reckless determination. Explosions lit up the void in brilliant bursts of light, casting eerie shadows across the faces of those aboard Aegis Dawn. Captain Elena Vasquez gripped the railing of the command deck, her knuckles white, as she watched the tactical display update in real time. Every second felt like an eternity. "We're holding them off," Marcus Kane reported from his station, his voice strained but resolute. "But we can't keep this up forever." Eleanor nodded grimly. The human fleet had pushed farther into enemy territory than anyone thought possible, but they were paying a heavy price. Ships were falling out of formation, crippled or destroyed by relentless Calith assaults. Yet despite the mounting losses, there was no sign of retreat, not from Elena, not from her crew, and certainly not from humanity as a whole. It was then that Ensign Ava Reyes stepped forward, clutching a data tablet tightly in her hands. Her face was pale, but her eyes burned with resolve. "Captain," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "I think I've found something." Elena turned to her immediately. "What is it?" Ava hesitated for only a moment before continuing. "Their superweapon. It's powered by a central core located on one of their command ships. If we can disable that core, the weapon won't fire, but—" She swallowed hard. "It's heavily guarded. We'd need to get close, really close." Elena studied her for a long moment, then nodded firmly. "Then that's what we'll do." The plan was simple yet perilous. Aegis Dawn would lead a small strike team directly toward the Calith flagship, drawing enemy fire while smaller vessels slipped past to deliver the final blow. It was a suicide mission for most who volunteered, but none hesitated. They knew what was at stake, not just Earth but the future of countless worlds under threat from the Calith Empire. As the strike team prepared, Elena addressed the crew over the intercom. "This isn't just about us anymore," she said, her voice steady despite the storm raging around them. "We're fighting for everyone who believes in freedom, in hope, in the idea that life is worth protecting. Whatever happens next, remember why we're here." Her words resonated deeply, igniting a spark of unity among the crew. These weren't soldiers bound by duty alone. They were individuals driven by love, purpose, and the belief that even the smallest act of courage could change the course of history. Admiral Krylos watched the unfolding chaos with growing unease. The humans were relentless, refusing to back down despite overwhelming odds. Their tactics were unpredictable, their movements fluid and adaptive. He had never encountered a species so willing to sacrifice everything for a cause greater than themselves. "They're targeting the flagship," Commander Vera warned, pointing to the tactical display. "If they reach the core—" Krylos clenched his fists, torn between admiration and frustration. The humans weren't playing by the rules, they were rewriting them, and now they were closing in on the Empire's greatest weapon. "Prepare to repel boarding parties," he ordered, his voice sharp, "and deploy all available forces to intercept them." But deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted. This wasn't just a battle, it was a reckoning, a test of values, ideologies, and the very essence of what it meant to be alive. The assault on the Calith flagship began with a ferocious barrage of missiles and energy beams from Aegis Dawn, creating a diversion that allowed the strike team to slip through undetected. Piloted by Marcus Kane, the team navigated treacherous corridors filled with hostile forces, relying on quick thinking and sheer determination to survive. Inside the flagship, the air was thick with tension. Calith warriors moved with precision, their training honed over centuries of warfare, but humanity's ingenuity proved unmatched. Using improvised tools and creative strategies, the strike team dismantled defenses one by one, inching closer to the core. Finally, they reached the chamber housing the superweapon's power source, a massive, pulsating orb of energy surrounded by layers of shielding. Ava worked quickly, her fingers flying over the console as she bypassed security protocols. Sweat dripped from her brow, but she didn't stop, not until the last barrier fell. "It's done," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of machinery. "Just give me 10 seconds to overload the system." Marcus glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "You sure you can handle it?" Ava nodded, forcing a weak smile. "Yeah, just don't let them stop me." As the countdown began, Marcus led the rest of the team in a desperate fight to hold off the advancing Calith forces. Bullets ricocheted off walls, explosions shook the floor beneath their feet, but they held their ground. For every step the enemy took forward, humanity pushed back harder. Back aboard, Aegis Dawn, Elena monitored the situation anxiously. The strike team's progress flickered on her screen, each second ticking away like a heartbeat. Then suddenly the signal went dark. No, she breathed, her heart sinking. But before despair could take hold, a blinding flash erupted from the Calith flagship. The superweapon's core destabilized, collapsing inward in a cataclysmic explosion that consumed the entire ship. Shockwaves rippled outward, scattering nearby vessels like leaves in a storm. On the bridge of Aegis Dawn, cheers erupted as the reality sank in. The superweapon was gone. Humanity had succeeded where others would have faltered. Admiral Krylos stared at the wreckage of his flagship, his mind reeling. The humans had done the impossible, not through brute force or advanced technology, but through sheer willpower and ingenuity. As the remnants of his fleet retreated, he realized something profound. Humanity wasn't just a rival. They were a mirror reflecting everything the Calith Empire lacked: compassion, adaptability, and unity. In that moment, Krylos made a decision. Turning to his remaining officers, he spoke softly but firmly. "Stand down. The battle is over." As the dust settled, humanity emerged victorious, but forever changed. They had proven themselves capable of standing toe-to-toe with the galaxy's mightiest empire, not because they sought power, but because they believed in something greater. And, as Aegis Dawn limped home, its hull scarred but intact, Elena gazed out at the stars with quiet pride. Humanity hadn't just saved itself. It had ignited a spark of hope that would burn brightly for generations to come. The aftermath of the battle was a quiet kind of chaos. The Calith Empire, once an unstoppable force in the galaxy, had been humbled, not by superior firepower or overwhelming numbers, but by something far less tangible yet infinitely more powerful: humanity's spirit. As news of the victory spread across Earth and beyond, celebrations erupted in every corner of the planet. Fireworks lit up the night skies, music filled the air, and people gathered in public squares to embrace one another, tears streaming down their faces. But amidst the joy there was also mourning. Countless lives had been lost in the fight against the Calith, brave men and women who had given everything for the cause. Captain Elena Vasquez stood at the forefront of this duality, her heart heavy with both pride and sorrow as she watched the world she fought so hard to protect come together in unity. On the bridge of Aegis Dawn, now docked safely above Earth, Elena gazed out at the blue-green orb below. It looked peaceful from here, its oceans shimmering under the light of the sun, its continents painted in shades of green and brown. But she knew better than anyone how fragile it truly was, and how much effort it took to preserve that beauty. "Captain," Marcus Kane said softly, approaching her from behind, "the Council wants to see you." Elena nodded, turning away from the viewport. "I figured they would." The United Earth Council convened in a grand hall beneath the capital city, its walls adorned with holographic displays showing images of the battle and its heroes. When Elena entered, accompanied by Marcus, Ava, and other key members of the strike team, the room erupted into applause. For a moment, she felt overwhelmed by the weight of what they had achieved. Councillor Marissa Chen stepped forward, her stern demeanor softened by gratitude. "You've done more than save our species," she said, addressing Elena directly. "You've shown the galaxy what humanity is capable of when we stand united. You've given us hope, not just for ourselves, but for everyone who believes in freedom," Dr. Amir Patel added, his voice filled with emotion. "And you've reminded us why exploration matters. Why reaching out to the stars isn't about conquest, it's about connection, about understanding." Elena listened quietly, letting their words wash over her. She didn't feel like a hero, she felt like someone who had simply done what needed to be done. Still, she knew the importance of moments like this, for the survivors, for the fallen, and for future generations. When it was her turn to speak, she stepped up to the podium, her gaze sweeping over the crowd. "This wasn't my victory," she began, her voice steady despite the emotions swirling inside her. "It wasn't even humanity's victory. It was a reminder that no matter how dark things get, we have the power to choose To fight for what's right, to protect each other, and to never give up. Her words resonated deeply, earning another round of applause. But as the ceremony continued, Elena found herself reflecting on something Admiral Krylos had said during the final hours of the battle. The Caliph hadn't just lost a war, they had lost their sense of invincibility, and perhaps in doing so, they had gained something far more valuable: perspective. In the days that followed, diplomatic envoys arrived from across the galaxy, seeking alliances with Earth. Some came offering aid, others seeking guidance. Among them was a delegation from the Veil Syndicate, the rival faction that had once challenged the Caliph Empire. Their leader, a tall alien with iridescent skin and piercing eyes, addressed the council with respect. "You've changed the balance of power in ways we couldn't have imagined," he said, "and you've inspired us to rethink our own strategies. Perhaps it's time for a new era, one built not on domination but cooperation." The council agreed, signing treaties and forming partnerships that marked the beginning of a new chapter in galactic history. Humanity, once dismissed as insignificant, was now seen as a beacon of hope, a symbol of resilience and ingenuity. Admiral Krylos, meanwhile, faced judgment within the Caliph Empire. Though his defeat had cost the Empire dearly, some among the ruling class recognized the lessons he brought back. In private chambers, he spoke candidly about humanity's strength, not in weapons or technology, but in their ability to care for one another and adapt to impossible challenges. "They don't fight because they must," Krylos told the Emperor. "They fight because they believe, because they refuse to let fear dictate their actions. If we wish to survive, if we wish to thrive, we must learn from them." To everyone's surprise, the Emperor listened. Slowly, reforms began within the Empire, shifting its focus from conquest to coexistence. It was a fragile peace, but it was a start. Months later, Elena returned to the observation deck of Aegis Dawn, now retired from active duty and preserved as a museum ship. Visitors walked through its corridors, marveling at the scars left by battles fought and won. As she stood there watching children press their hands against the glass, she felt a profound sense of fulfillment. Marcus joined her, holding 2 cups of coffee. Handing one to Elena, he smiled faintly. "Think we'll ever see another adventure like that?" Elena chuckled, taking a sip. "I hope not. But if we do—" She paused, looking out at the stars. "We'll handle it, together." As night fell over Earth, the sky glittered with countless points of light. Somewhere out there, among those distant suns and swirling nebulae, lay infinite possibilities. Humanity had taken its first steps onto the galactic stage, proving that even the smallest voices could spark monumental change. And somewhere, deep in the vastness of space, Admiral Krylos looked toward Earth, his expression thoughtful. Perhaps, he mused, the universe wasn't as cold and unyielding as he'd always believed. Perhaps it was full of life and hope. With that thought, he turned away, leaving behind the image of a blue-green world shining brightly against the void. A world that had taught him and the galaxy what it truly meant to be alive.